Hello everyone and welcome to the 2022 Game of the Year video, brought to you right on time. Ooh, God. This video has been, well, to borrow a game dev term here, development hell. Initially, I had done a Game of the Year live stream ranking each game, and the original plan was to cut that up and upload that stream, but I remembered that I really like writing scripts and editing longer videos, and well, this idea was back in December. This little Game of the Year video quickly became a top 22 countdown reviewing basically every game I played this year. This is a long-ass video. It's by far the longest video I've ever made, but, you know, I had a lot of fun putting this together, and this has sort of reignited a spark in me, so I hope it's enjoyable. Another reason this took a while to come out is that I am now back in school full-time. I basically walked away from my full-time corporate job last year and said, fuck it, let's give this whole thing another shot. It's been going great, but because of that I haven't exactly had a lot of free time that wasn't already taken up by some fantastic games that came out this year. And even more games than what I'm covering today came out last year that I really want to get around to at some point. But in this video I'd like to wrap up everything that I did get a chance to play last year, and there were a lot of hitters. I'll also be filling out this fancy tier list just to kind of further explain how I feel about each game. Just think of F through A tier as 1 to 5 on the quality scale, but S tier, those are those classics. I only played a couple games this year that will be below C tier. I don't really go out of my way to play bad games. They find me. Let me put it to you like this. Maybe this will be a bit more understandable. The worst game I played this year was Babylon's Fall. There's a lot that could be said about this game, but I'll keep it short. All you really need to know is that even if you play this game by yourself, no teammates, you're still connecting to a server and will get lag on everything you do. That means every time you attack an enemy, there is an almost half-second delay until any damage or hit stun is applied. I played on PS5 connected via Ethernet, and every one of my sessions had this persistent delay. One time I also was changing options and I went up to go blow my nose, and I got kicked from the tutorial mission for inactivity. I had to start a whole new character. I think the fact that these things can even happen in a game is enough to be a complete non-starter, but thankfully enough, the game is pretty shitty too. The developer is surprisingly Platinum Games. They've done some of the most well-made and exciting action games of all time, but in Babylon's Fall, it seems like each and every lesson they've learned from those games was ignored. This is by far the most simplistic gameplay system I've ever seen from this developer. I haven't played all their games, but I'm willing to bet it's this one. You've got a light attack and a heavy attack, but the combo systems are not very impressive. And then you have these devil arms that float off your back, and you can press L2 or R2, which one you have equipped. Oh, I have the pistol equipped? Boom. It like shoots the pistol. You know what that means in gameplay? The whole time you play, you're doing your combos and you just, oh yeah, I almost forgot to, there's no timing involved. You just get more damage when you do that. You spend your meter. If I'm scraping for anything positive here, I'd say that while most of the art style is a miss for me, there is the occasional really pretty environment. I like when you're at the very base of the Tower of Babylon and you can look out in the distance. That looked cool, but that's really it. Even things that should be good are bad. There's a character creator, but there are very few options here. There's a grade system, but it seems to be completely broken. I'll get hit once or twice in a fight and get F rank, and then the next fight I'll get pummeled for an hour and get S rank. What is going on here? Just 3 levels into the game, I found myself taking forever to kill enemies. Even with all the best equipment I can find, constantly mashing the triggers to do more damage, these enemies just had massively inflated health bars. It didn't make things more difficult, it was just more boring. Now I think what's going on is it's obviously scaled for a full party and it doesn't scale down to a solo play. At first that might seem like a lazy afterthought, but I think it might be intentional. It's a convenient incentive for players to buff their character by spending real-world money. You could make a ton of different purchases with virtual currency. There were multiple battle passes over its lifespan. This kind of stuff would be understandable in a free-to-play mobile game, but Babylon's Fall released at $60. Thankfully, I didn't spend anywhere near that on this game. It dropped pretty quickly because nobody bought it. According to Steam charts, the game peaked at just over 1,000 players on Steam. A month later, there were 85 active players, and last month, there were 1.9. Still not clicking? Okay, let me put it to you a different way. There are more viewers on my live stream than players of this game. This game is also going to die. In February, this game's going to end service, and in true mobile game fashion, that means you will not be able to play the game anymore. Everyone's characters are going to be deleted next month, and that disc you've got is now a main menu simulator. When you launch the game now, there's a message explaining this that borderline guilt trips the player, and part of me feels good to see this game melt away money from Square Enix's pockets for making a game like this, but I still don't think this is anything to celebrate no matter how bad the game is. Platinum Games is a talented studio. A little spoiler, but the second game they released this year is very high on this list. I honestly think there's potential in this foundation for a good game if it was free to play and wasn't so bad. But the real reason this game failed and this one succeeded is obvious. One of them is bursting with passion, the other feels like it was made as an assignment. The Devil in Me is definitely the funniest game I played this year. Every time a character would die and then reappear suddenly in a later cutscene, still impaled with the spike that killed them, that was great. The character animations really remind me of those old Garry's Mod videos I used to like. And the finale, I mean, it's impossible not to smile. Please.
Please! Yes! No, stop it. What is he, Jason? I can't. God.
Here we go. Oh, give me the axe. Here we go.
Fuck him up. I don't know what I have to do, but...
Ooh. Oh, the mask off.
You got the mask off? Oh, who is it?
Hey, put another one back on. Oh yeah, $40 for this game. They're raising the price of the series despite having no real changes. That's a pretty good one too. My question is this: patches may come out and fix these bugs, but do you think that'd make it a better experience?
No.
QTE to Mr. Rock.
I mean, I just landed in the water. Oh no! Don't tell me it runs over.
Huh? My game? What happened to my game? What? What the fuck? Nintendo's quality standard of their billion-dollar franchise continues to plummet. I was very excited to see how the series would continue following the success of Legends Arceus, and there are plenty of lessons learned from that game that are applied here, but Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, just like everyone feared, came out half-baked. It's only been 8 months since the last new release. There are 2 mainline Pokemon games on this list. You think this game isn't unfinished? Look at it, dude! There are glitches everywhere. We're talking Sonic 06 level of quality, where if there's a door you want to clip through, you probably can, if you believe hard enough. I feel like I could bend the switch in my hand and make the game glitch in some way. But you want to know what else? Going in C tier. In spite of everything, it does still end up being a really fun Pokemon game. The levels in this game are so open. Very open, in fact. The variety in Pokemon available to your team at any given time is gigantic relatively to other games in the series. The multiplayer is fun to mess around in as well, but it's disappointingly limited. Scarlet and Violet structure is pretty much like an MMO, but every quest in the game is instanced. You can see each other's Pokemon, you can catch these raid Pokemon together, but that's really all that you can do with another player. If you could double battle gym leaders, that would have been fantastic. And can I just say, these might be some of the best gym battles in the series. The music is incredible. I wasn't really sold on the crowd singing from Sword and Shield, but I'm glad they've stuck with it because they've done something really special here. Would have hit harder if they weren't the only voices in the entire game. There's still no voice acting in this shit. They were also mostly pretty easy. Sadly, the game does not scale to your character. That's a big improvement they could make. We could keep going and talk about the endless improvements they could make to this game, but I think they should focus on making a functional game first. That'd be a good start. Oh my god, number 19. This shit is gonna take forever. Okay, I gotta speed it up. Thymesia. Okay, this game is alright. Yeah, it was pretty good. It was impressive from a pretty small team, you know, not the most original ideas, and it's pretty short, but it's short and sweet. Some good boss fights, some decent atmosphere, some cool attacks. I do wish there was proper voice acting, and I wish the font looked a little less like YouTube subtitles. I've been talking a lot of shit so far, and I want you to know if you disagree with me or if something I've said has upset you, I'm sorry. You know, maybe I was a little too harsh. So I want to give you some ammo you could use against me. I still buy the new Call of Duty games that come out every year. I spent $70 this year to play the campaign early. That should be enough to pretty much invalidate everything I ever say. I'm never doing this again. I thought the campaign had some good moments, but kind of went out with a whisper. I don't feel like this game was tested very well. I had multiple game-breaking bugs and crashes, and the AI in particular felt very dated. Multiplayer has fewer maps and less weapons than previous games for some reason. When it comes to Call of Duty multiplayer, I tend to not really get into the ones with a faster time to kill. Modern Warfare 2 has probably the fastest in the series. It encourages very defensive play, and while it can work in a tactical way, I don't think it's a good fit for the arcade appeal of Call of Duty, but that's just me. This time to kill was way too long, I don't want to see that, but at least having some potential to turn on people and outplay them is what the series is at its finest. I uninstalled before either of these came out. In Modern Warfare 2, everything is overpowered, and because everything is overpowered, then nothing is overpowered. Wait, did I say Modern Warfare 2? Hold on. Oh, I meant DNF Duel. There are some straight up goofy combos you can do. Some of these hitboxes are cursed, but it never felt frustrating. Odds are your character has just as crazy shit they can throw out. And I loved being able to run the set with people at EVO this year. It's a pretty fun game, it doesn't really hit like these do. Sadly, it seemed like the game pretty quickly disappeared after it came out. I'm not one to say that a game is dead, except for Babylon's Fall, but boy, do I get the feeling we are on life support here. Things were looking grim, but, you know, we just got a new character announced, finally, and apparently there was a big balance update, so, you know, we'll see. If you know some friends that are going to put in the time to learn it and you can run some games with, then I'd recommend it if you see it on sale. I'd love to see this game grow and succeed, but it might be too little too late. Going into Stranger of Paradise, I was looking for a decent Souls-like with some so bad it's good dialogue. By the time I was done, I think it dragged on just a tad, but I was very impressed with some of its bosses. I was blown away by the batshit insane ending and fell in love with one of my favorite new characters. No regrets. Can't wait to play the DLC. Here's the thing. I didn't finish this game. Frankly, I didn't make it very far at all. After really trying to like this game twice, I've come to the conclusion that it's just not for me. Which, I don't think it's a bad game, you know, I don't know. I'm just gonna put it in C tier and hope that everyone's happy. Sonic Frontiers is jumping up to B tier. It's the kind of game where you really could go on all day listing all of its problems, and it's got big ones. But at the end of the day, it's a gun game. It's a fun game. And for Sonic, that's a huge win. The story really caught me off guard. Before the game was released, word got out that the game's narrative was being written by someone that was involved with the Sonic comics. I don't know the full story, but a lot of the Sonic community were excited to see a more mature and dark story. But I feel like they say that every time a new Sonic game comes out, so I had my reservations. After playing the game, yeah, I'm happy to say it was a strong point of the game. There are huge lore revelations for the series. It's almost like a pseudo-sequel to Adventure 1. There are mountains of dialogue and characterization between these characters. There's character development, there's growth, there's an emotional Eggman scene. But if there's one thing this game doesn't have, it's focus. The open environments are fun, but they hardly feel like they were made with Sonic in mind. Most of the things you do in this game take place on floating rails and generic platforms that could have been placed anywhere. The third island is filled with what looks like littered obstacles, and these oftentimes will lock you into a 2D section that you were not trying to play. The control in this game could also use a lot of work. Sonic just does not feel how you would expect him to. The most rewarding Sonic games to play to me are the ones that are about building up momentum. And in this game, it feels like they're doing everything they can to limit your momentum. If you want to go fast, you hold the boost button. Aside from that, there are active measures in place to stop you from going fast. The instant you jump, you lose all of your speed. If you run off a ledge, you'll grind to a halt. Sometimes you'll shoot straight toward the ground. Sonic's character has this odd magnetism that kicks in whenever he runs too fast. It feels like the developers were deathly afraid of the floatiness that you sometimes see in some other Sonic fan games. Their solution was to gimp your freedom of movement. That's not the correct solution. The correct solution is to build an environment with what the player can do in mind and encourage them. The actual levels they do give you, great music aside, are pretty bland. There are no original level themes. These are all recycled assets from Sonic Generations. Sometimes even the levels themselves are copy-pasted layouts from older games. Now, they're obviously going for nostalgia here. I'm not gonna lie and say I didn't perk up when I recognized Sky Rail. That was my favorite level back in the day. It's just, listen, if what I'm doing in this new game is playing a 20-year-old level covered in 10-year-old assets with far worse controls, what did we really accomplish here? Now, the good news is there is a game out right now, might even be on sale. It's a perfect example of high-speed action in an open zone done right. If you want to play the peak potential of this game, that game exists and it's out. It's on Steam, it's on consoles, it's being slept on like crazy. And that game is Solar Ash. It has grind rails, it has good combat, it has quest lines, it has costumes, it has giant bosses that you physically climb. Every quality Sonic Frontiers has, Solar Ash does it better. It's actually crazy.
keep trying to tell you people about this game.
Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is a pretty iterative release in the series that mostly builds directly off of Borderlands 3, kind of like how the pre-sequel built off the second game. But this time I think I actually prefer this one. This was my grind of choice for a good part of this year. When I played Borderlands 3, I almost had to mute the game. You know, I'm not one to say that something is cringe, but I thought the writing was pretty rough in that one. I'm happy to say that most of the time, Wonderlands was pretty funny and clever. It definitely can be cringe, but it hits more than it misses. It definitely helps if you've ever played D&D, but the cast does a great job. Andy Samberg, Wanda Sykes, Will Arnett, they do a great job. The best addition to the gameplay is an all-new slot for a changeable melee weapon. Now, your moveset doesn't really change, but the abilities you find built into these melee weapons often bring a good synergy to a bunch of different playstyles. And I'd love to see them take this even further in the future. Give me multiple movesets per weapon. Instead of grenades, you have spells in this game, but you can still only ever bind your ult and one other ability. If I could bind a ton of them at once, or bring up a weapon wheel or a shortcut menu, I think that would add a ton of variety to the combat. This game is a great example of how balancing the enemies to your character can be a success. Pretty much every enemy in this game scales to where you are at any time. There are occasional story missions that jump ahead in level and force you to do side missions you may have neglected, but when you do, everything you fight will be close to your level. This gives you a consistent level of challenge. This is how you do it. You also can't jump straight to the maximum mayhem level like in Borderlands 3 and permanently fuck up the loot for the rest of the game. You unlock higher levels with a post-game roguelike mode. This was enough to keep me playing for a long time. If they dropped a $20 Borderlands roguelike, that would sell like hotcakes. I don't care about a story, I don't want any of that, just give me a grind. Now, it seemed like to me that it had a pretty good post-game, but I only ever put about 30 hours into the game, so don't take my word for it. It seems like some people aren't very happy. I was gifted this DLC by a friend. We are no longer friends. I imagine most people are going to be shocked to see Callisto Protocol as high as B tier. Frankly, I was hoping I could put it even higher. The game makes a remarkable first impression. There are jaw-dropping environments and atmosphere, great performances from its main cast, and janky but very satisfying combat. Before I beat the game, I'd see people bash it on social media and wonder, what the fuck is everyone smoking? And where can I find it? But as I got further in the game, it started to make more sense. In many ways, this game is unfinished. There are glaring design issues on top of a mountain of bugs. And by the end of the game, I was left wondering, what the fuck happened? All the OGs got together to work on this game. Don't get me wrong, I'm excited for the Dead Space remake, but respectfully, all they're doing is trying to imitate the games that these kings make. They're out here preparing to show us the next step of their creative vision. After beating the game, I'm still wondering where it is. Despite the amount of Dead Space alumni working on this game, there are a large number of gameplay issues that, in context of this being their fourth go of things at this point, they seem like really silly mistakes. You can't telekinesis items. There are multiple issues where I couldn't pick up an item sitting right in front of me or on a slightly elevated surface. The focus of this game is the melee combat. Now, something to keep in mind with any combat system, especially a survival horror game, is you never want to make the player feel too capable with any kind of weaponry they find. This logic was not applied when developing the telekinesis system. There is no safe system to store your guns in. This means that gun ammo from all different kinds is going to clog up your inventory. A common strategy is to only keep the plasma cutter and one other weapon on your person, so your limited inventory space isn't taken up from ammo drops of guns that you don't really need. I don't really need a lot of these guns, and if I buy them, it's gonna mean a bigger headache for my limited inventory. There are no unlockables of any kind in this game. There's no New Game Plus, there's no harder difficulty you unlock. Both of these are actually coming post-launch in a free update. I believe the thought behind removing this from the base game is to provide a way to bring people back into the game for no extra charge sometime after it's come out, possibly after a number of issues have been fixed with patches as well. Now, this approach works well in a game like God of War, for example, which is doing this exactly. And this game already offers a pretty beefy endgame. But in Callisto Protocol, as of right now, when you beat the game, there is no way to continue your character. By the end of the game, I've only maxed out one upgrade tree, and there are 2 entire guns I haven't even used yet. I'd like to go back through the game and see areas I haven't explored, but with no New Game Plus or Chapter Select, I cannot continue fleshing out this character. If I try to continue, it just loads the final scene of the game. I have no choice but to start fresh if I want to keep playing. To me, this is not an acceptable cut to make in this kind of game. Now, in a month when the update comes out, this won't be an issue anymore, but it sets a pretty bad precedent. I'd love to see a sequel to this game come out, but I don't think waiting for a New Game Plus is an acceptable compromise. The DNA is here to make an incredible game, and I wish all the best to Striking Distance. I love seeing everyone reunited and pursuing their passion, but I don't know. Sonic Origins is a collection of Sonic 1, 2, CD, 3, and Knuckles. It's out on everything, so if you're looking for a simple way to play the classics on modern consoles, then this is a fine release. It's a bit too expensive, and I'm not really sure what I'm looking at here, but if you've never played these games and want to see what you're missing, or maybe it's been a while, I think this is a good collection. However, if you ask a Sonic enthusiast like myself, it's a different discussion. I'm going to spare you the details here. You could open a Goosebumps novel with the words $60 multiplayer focused title, and I wouldn't be able to sleep for days. But I did see one release this year that flexed on the entire industry. Splatoon 3 is all of those things, and it still ends up feeling like a bargain. Not only do you have a fully fleshed out and unique multiplayer with a ton of varied modes, you've got so many unlockable weapons, you've got endless drip and customization, oh yeah, and also a full single player campaign. Oh, and a Nazi zombie mode. Oh, and a card-based minigame. To me, it feels like this game could never get old. But it's also fair to say this is my first Splatoon game, and I'm not quite sure how much of this is novelty at this point. I just know that I'm having fun. But the biggest thing really keeping me from dumping a lot of time into this game is the netcode. The tick rate is horrible. I believe it only updates once every 4 frames. You will trade kills with other players very often. This experience isn't far off of what we saw on the Nintendo Wii multiplayer, playing the Conduit. So to see this kind of thing still happen in 2023 is disappointing, let alone on a paid online service. I want to love you, Splatoon, but they don't. If we can just ignore this game's existence for a bit, I think 2022 was a great year for Pokemon. Legends Arceus doesn't play like a traditional Pokemon game. Instead of catching Pokemon, you do it like this. Instead of building bonds with each adorable creature you find, you're catching them in droves and releasing them in bulk in exchange for Titanite shards. I've been playing Pokemon games since Ruby as a young boy. This is the only Pokemon I've ever bothered to complete the Pokédex in. Not only is the reward much better than usual, but the process is made so much more fun with the incentives they give you for catching. I always thought Gen 4 had the best selection of legendaries, and this game does them justice. First of all, by allowing you to actually get them. Second, by involving you in boss fights with a dodge roll. I had so much fun with this game, and I really hope that more Legends games come out as a focused single-player experience alongside the main games. A Pokemon Legends Unova? That would go so crazy. Sit down. Let Grandpa tell you a story about Battle Ride. See, back in my day, you could just fight. There were no lanes. You and your champ duking it out, collecting dubs. Battle Ride had a very competent battle system, so it's no surprise that the developer's latest game, a survival game named V Rising, shines in its combat. The boss fights are impressively well made, there's a lot of different things to build, and the PvP is pretty fun. There haven't been many big updates yet, but the amount of content already in the game is pretty impressive for the price. This is my first survival game aside from maybe Minecraft back in the day, so it might be getting favor from me just by nature of it being my first exposure to the genre. But I still stand by it, it's a lot of fun. If I can spend an hour only chopping trees and hitting stone and still feel accomplished by the end, then we've got a good-ass game on our hands. A lot of people like to talk shit about The Last of Us, and while I'll still join down there in the trenches talking shit with everyone else, I'm still a simp for this game. You know, I love the story and the characters, but this game sits just in B tier, just due to the nature of its release. Last of Us did not need a remake, it's still available and being sold now, and it plays great. Some people think it's a cash grab. I have to agree. It's an obvious display of blatant American greed. The game was sold at $70, that's 10 more than the original release, 50 more than the PlayStation remaster. This remake is also missing the multiplayer mode, so not only is it more expensive, but it has less content. They've justified this by stating they're focusing their time on their upcoming multiplayer-only title instead, but it doesn't make this any less of a bad value. I still recommend most people just pick up the remastered version. It often goes on sale for just $10, it plays nearly identical, and has more content. What this game is a luxury product, so if you have the luxury, you've got some money, you've got that new OLED TV, by all means. If you decide to play Triangle Strategy, you need to be prepared to read. We're talking visual novel levels here, but if you commit to it and really immerse yourself, you'll find a surprisingly gripping narrative behind a fantastic tactics game. These characters have very specialized movesets that act more like chess pieces than units. What made the reading more bearable for me was actually playing on the hardest difficulty. These maps are so well designed, you'll look at these in the preview screen and think, you mother... But when you finally make it through, you're going to be saying to yourself, you know what? Give me more text, I deserved a break. God of War Ragnarok. This game is like a journey. There are jaw-dropping boss fights, incredible characters, phenomenal soundtrack. It's a great time, but as we crest towards the top of this list, the more my personal tastes come into play. For me, I'm gonna put it right here. At the end of the day, it's still just a story game, and I don't think I could ever put a story game in S tier, just based on my tastes. A story game means an experiential and film-like presentation. That means what you're necessarily doing at a given time as a game comes secondary to what's happening in the story. More often than not, that means slower sections that give players plenty of time for characterization or world building. And for the story, this is great. There is a ton of dialogue to hear. But in the respects of playing a game, I didn't really feel that my time was the most valued throughout the entire game. This is a long game, especially if you play on the hardest difficulty, and especially if you do all the side content. Now, don't get me wrong, the amount of content is impressive, but we're talking about personal tastes, and I just found myself too tired of this gameplay loop to stay interested. But from what I did play, I did love my time with it. I do think it's a fantastic game. I'm sure many people would place God of War Ragnarok undisputably in S tier on their list. But remember, the S in S tier stands for subjective. And subjectively speaking, unskippable cutscenes, forced walk-in chats, long stretches of climbing that require minimal brain activity, artificially extending the loading screens to let NPCs finish talking, and characters shouting out the solutions to puzzles as soon as you walk in a room. These are all qualities that keep a game out of S tier, for me. I can't wait to see the comments after that one. I think maybe the reason I worded that so carefully and tried to validate my viewpoint on that game is because it got beat by Xenoblade Chronicles 3, baby. I've heard enough good things about these games for ages, and with 3 coming out this year, I set out on a deeply personal weeb journey to get caught up. I played this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this before I watched a cutscene movie. I played all of this until I reached that point. If you played this game, you know what point I'm talking about. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking. All so I could get to this. And with all of these games and stories fresh in my mind, I could say this might be the best of the series. It has a great combat system, a ton of content, beautiful worlds, and a great story. Maybe not as well thought out as the first game, but it's great. And I'm very thankful that they've stepped back from the overly tropey and fan-servicey style of the second game. There are a couple things that keep this game out of S tier. I think the balance of the game needs a lot of work. In Xenoblade games, the experience you gain from quests or visiting new locations is stored and not used right away. You can use it later at a campsite, but generally you're meant to only do this when you really need it so you don't overpower your character. Despite never once cashing in XP from a campsite, and only really doing main and hero quests, not touching any of these side quests, I found myself scaling way past most creatures. At any given time, I had another 10 levels worth of reserve XP I could cash in on my characters. I also think that chain attacks are way too strong. These have evolved from an occasional powerful move you can throw out to basically dominating the entire fight. Most fights in late game Xenoblade involve just surviving long enough to start your chain attacks, which take way too long, don't really have a lot of room for error, and can do millions of points of damage. But in the face of everything this game gets right, these are minor issues. I've put 130 hours in this game so far, and I am not even close to being finished. Balancing issues aside, it's one of the most enjoyable JRPGs on the system. And there's even more DLC coming out, which is sure to be enjoyable.
What the fuck? What? What am I looking at?
Platinum Games almost sullied their reputation, but thankfully they redeemed themselves the very same year. The Bayonetta games are ludicrous adrenaline rushes, focused on exciting the player as much as possible at any given moment. Except for this one. I would have loved to put Bayonetta 3 in S tier, right up there with its family, but I can't. If we're talking about the tried and true gameplay experience, it is an S tier action game. It has all the ingredients that make the Bayonetta games fantastic. Unbelievable spectacle, weapons with combo mechanics so deep you could write a book about them. The only real gripes I have with Bayonetta 3 have nothing to do with Bayonetta. It's these two. Occasionally control will swap to one of these two characters at various points in the game to varying degrees of success. I like Viola's design and her battle theme is great, but for how much playtime they give to Viola, which ends up being about every 2 or 3 levels you'll swap to her, she is not fleshed out nearly enough to warrant that amount of screen time. Bayonetta consistently unlocks new weapons and summons, sometimes 4 of them will unlock at one time, and they're all incredibly deep. Viola has just one weapon and one summon for the entire game. She unlocks a new jump mechanic at some point, but it's arguably worse than her original jump, and that's pretty much it. From a story side of things, it's not looking too good, but the stories have never been good in Bayonetta, so it's fine. John's missions radically change up the gameplay to side-scrolling stealth sections. It's not as bad as it sounds. The first one is pretty slow, but I found that every mission after the first one introduced enough new mechanics to stay interesting, and they had some pretty good set pieces. To be clear, the gameplay from either of these characters aren't bad, they're just not up to the standard of quality you'd expect from this series. Introducing side missions like these are meant to break up the pace if the main campaign starts becoming too monotonous. But this is a Bayonetta game. I'm not sure if it's even possible to get bored of a Bayonetta game, so their inclusion here is questionable. It might be my least favorite in the series, but both longtime fans and newcomers looking for a good Switch game should not be put off at all from one of the best action games on the system. Before this year, I didn't know a damn thing about Kirby. The only two games I've played were the 64 game and Air Ride. Aside from that, I've always kept a passing interest. I like the style and the music, and I enjoy the tradition of always bringing out some darker themes towards the finale, but never quite enough to sit down with a game. That is until Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which has single-handedly made me a Kirby fan. Beautiful environments, music, very well thought out levels, boss fights that can get insane. There is so much care and attention and love put in this game. It has the best movie viewer I've ever seen. A lot of these games, you click a menu that says movie viewer and you click a cutscene. In Kirby, you walk into a theater, you choose which movie you want to see, you take your ticket, you walk in and sit down, and the show starts, and it starts the theme. Some games will have a sound test that you click a song and listen to music. In Kirby, there is a real band chilling in the hub world, drawing out their set list on a chalkboard. And you can donate currency to this band to grow them into a more sophisticated studio, which in turn unlocks more songs. This is that good shit. I'm really struggling to think of any negative of this game. I would say that it's only 30 FPS, and that it's maybe a bit too easy. By the end, there are some great boss fight gauntlets and really tough fights, but as a whole, I wish it could have been a bit more challenging. I just wish the curve was a bit more steady, because I didn't die in this game until the very last level. The darker elements do not disappoint either. I won't say any more than that. If that's an element you're interested in, you really should see and hear it from the game itself for your first time. Game of the year goes to FIFA! Yeah, big surprise, huh? Elden Ring is coming up on its year anniversary, and I still don't feel like I can confidently review it. If you ask me what my favorite Souls game is, that answer could change by the day. But if you ask me where I'd rank Elden Ring in the series, it's an even harder question. In many ways, it's an impressive leap forward not just for the Souls series, but for the entire open world genre. But many of those same leaps forward have put too much strain on the Souls formula for it to emerge unscathed. This is a massive, massive, massive world, and you can really go almost anywhere you want. In the early game, all the way up until the Dragon Sentinel outside Leyndell, there isn't a single boss that has to be killed to explore this entire map. I love what this means for the freedom of exploration and replayability, but that comes at a big cost of the balance of the game. You can break your character more easily than any other Souls game just by taking a beeline to whatever powerful weapon, upgrade material, or giant sleeping dragon that drops a shit ton of souls you want. That was a disastrous sentence. Now, risking the journey into a dangerous area in search of a special item in the early game is nothing new for the series. It's one of my favorite qualities, but it's just too easy in Elden Ring to buff your character. Being able to fast travel not just from any bonfire on the map, but from anywhere on the map, alleviates any tension of being trapped in a maze like Blighttown. And these excursions often don't mean navigating through tense areas, it just means how well can you dodge enemies on your double jumping horse. Enemies don't scale to your level in any way, and it's debatable if enemy scaling is the correct solution for a problem like this. I think we can all agree that for the most part, the balance is fucked. When you arrive at Raya Lucaria, the second real dungeon of the game, at a low enough level, it's a challenging and clever gauntlet, but if you take up From on their offer and explore diligently, you're going to be so leveled up you blast through this place like a cakewalk. Well, in the Souls formula, if you meet a boss that's too hard, that usually means trying one of 2 or 3 different other routes that might be available to you. Maybe getting a new weapon or a level up and then returning. In Elden Ring, this other area you can check is the entire map. I've seen some people ask for a linear mod of this game, and the more I think about it, that doesn't seem like too bad of an idea. The levels in a linear Souls game are meant to increase with challenge to match or exceed the player's own growth. But in Elden Ring, there are so many levels and no restrictions, the player's growth is rampant. I found that for most of the game, the challenge level was high enough for me, but time will tell and everyone's experience can be so different. Stacking Elden Ring up against its brothers and sisters is a difficult discussion for sure. Thankfully, the only conversation we need to really have in this video is how Elden Ring compares to the other shit on this list. And thankfully, that's an easy one. Oh my god. The openness of the game may have impacted the balance, but the pros outweigh the cons. I have never had this much fun exploring a world in a game. Signature, From Software, incredible boss fights, jaw-dropping music, and the more I learn about this lore, the more I think it might be the best in the series. Let me pick just one topic to focus on for this video. It's the most important thing I look for in a Souls game, and that's replayability. I consider Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls openness a wonderful quality. Nothing beats dipping your toes into a harder level, try to find a rare weapon, or focus on a specific armor or other weapons to flesh out your build early. Elden Ring does this one trait so well it's almost cheating just by having an open world structure. Build variety is no concern in Elden Ring. It really has learned from the GOAT. You are constantly fighting interesting bosses, finding dungeons under any little pebble you might trip over, and you're always well rewarded. Other open world games will just throw XP or resources at you. In Elden Ring, you're always finding new armor sets, new weapons, new abilities. The list goes on. Now, even if the loot I found didn't suit my playstyle, I never felt like my time was wasted. A lot of people have said that the mass amounts of these side dungeons have killed the replayability of the game, because once you find it in your first playthrough, these areas are carried just by the fact that they're new. But in your second playthrough, you really don't have a need to explore them. I don't think you're ever really meant to. Let me explain. When I think of a new playthrough of a Souls game that I've already beaten, it usually goes like this. Let me go on Fextra Life, take a look through all the weapons, find some cool spells, and decide what character I want to make. If I'm on this new character and I just found a side dungeon, I'm immediately looking up what the loot is. If the reward in this side dungeon is a staff I don't need, then fuck it, I'm not gonna waste my time. That's the beauty of the replayability of this game. You get exactly what you want to do. There is no fluff. If I can sound like an old ass man for a second, dude, I remember renting Demon Souls on PS3 from Family Video, trying to convince my friends to play it. Now we're at the point where if you say you like Elden Ring, you could be called a normie. I rock in my bed at night at this consideration. But I'm hoping with all this normie money, From can finally evolve as a studio. I think this engine is just a bit too aging. They really need to start making some money moves. And we're only just getting started with this game as well. A new arena update came out. I'm still on copium that they're gonna announce DLC. And it just started going on sale this holiday. So if you see it cheap and you've never played it, then I definitely recommend you dive in to the game of the year, Elden Ring. Thanks for watching, everyone. Here's to another year. Here's to all the shit we're gonna play next year. And I'll see you around. Have a good one.